Yeah, Bennett. Welcome back to Inside the Indie Country Podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Benally, National Travel Practice Leader at REDW. Today, I'm honored to welcome Rebecca George, Executive Director of the Washington Indian Gaming Association. Rebecca is a citizen of Port Gamble Squamish Tribe and brings extensive experience as an educator, advocate, and policy advisor for tribal gaming. Through her leadership with Washington tribes, she's raised awareness about how tribes investments in gaming can benefit communities throughout the Washington state area. Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What an honor. I appreciate the invitation and being here. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Really appreciate you taking time. I know that um, you got a lot of people tugging at your time, so we really appreciate setting some time aside for us. You know, um, kind of talking about our, um, if you will, before the podcast about what we're kind of after, with this, this next series of different, discussions we're having. And that's kind of, focused around gaming of the future and, you know, what does that look like, in your neck of the woods. And so, one of the things though, kind of when we start off is, just um, kind of getting an idea on the perspective of gaming in your region and whatnot. So, really, as the executive director, what are some of the most common, misconceptions you encounter, with respect to gaming, and how do you address those, and just kind of curious on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think with Indian gaming, there are a lot of misperceptions, not just with gaming, quite frankly, but with tribes in general. So, a big part of what we do here in Washington and through WIGA is we will track public opinion about tribes and gain better understanding about what they think about us, what they know about us, what they believe or don't believe. And then we really can tailor communications based on our understanding of what the public knows or doesn't know. So misperceptions are pretty much across the board. Things like every Indian is getting a check, we don't pay taxes, there's corruption at the top. I think my biggest misperception that I've been working to educate our elected leaders on is this idea of these big, beautiful properties that we have and why that building doesn't equate to the story that's happening on the reservation. And I think that over time, there's been some distrust about, how can you have this beautiful property and then dilapidated buildings when you get on the reservation? And so, really, kind of helping distill this
Yeah.
to dismantle some of those
Yeah.
myths,
Yeah.
and then really about where the money goes. I think that people really understand state lotteries and what they're doing to raise revenue for essential government services. And here in Washington, our lottery raises revenue for gaming or for education. And, tribes are gaming revenues for education and healthcare, natural resources, and all of the essential parts of our government services.
hmm hmm No, that's a good point. For my tribe, the nation there here in northern Arizona, it was interesting. One of the last tribes to actually kind of get into gaming, just because, I mean, there were different misconceptions, I think internally as a tribe, kind of with respect to traditional values, with respect to gaming, and then also just, you know, um, if you will, kind of the negative side effects from it. But, ultimately, I mean, we know that what that source of revenue can do, right? As far as when it comes to governmental services and, really helping out, tribal members who do, um, have that opportunity. And for me, personally, like, kind of my journey was, uh, when it first came about for our tribe, my thought was first was like, I, I, I don't, I don't gamble, I don't feel it like it's a source that's gonna, do much for us. But my kind of eye-opening experience was in college, and it was kind of funny because I was taking summer courses down in Southern Arizona, and I needed a job. So, all the summer jobs were taken up, by other students. And so, I had a friend of mine. She had mentioned that, hey, my dad's a GM at a casino right there near Tucson. And so I was like, okay. And then she's like, he's looking for some oh, it's missing my mind right now. Why am I forgetting this? Is the guys that go out and get the cars.
Valet.
Valet. There you go. I'm sorry.
There you go.
I had a brain fart this morning. Hopefully that's the last one. So she had introduced me the valet, and so like for about a good 2 months over the summer, I worked as a valet, and then I saw like, okay, cool, that I got in, did that, and then even more, the tribe she was enrolled in, she had mentioned that, hey, hey, we got a summer basketball team that did you want to join them? I'm like, sure. And they had this like crazy facility, it just looked like a facility that was kind of built, and they had, all this, equipment in there. You had, elder time in there. You had, different younger, the younger generation playing there and doing things there, and, things to do, and I was just talking to her. I was like, wow, man, how did all this, kind of get together? She goes, well, a lot of it comes from, the revenues from the casino, and so that was kind of my first introduction. It wasn't until college that I realized this. And then, as my career, moved up, and I work with tribes all across the country. And so I see a lot of that. And um, I guess that's the side of things that I really see like a lot of the benefit. And that was my kind of my personal, journey and experience through this, which was pretty cool. And, um, you know, um, I thought that was, pretty cool. So when the opportunity came to the nomination, that's where I was like, okay, I think you kind of see like what could we really do with this, and what kind of services can it generate, especially jobs.
Mhm.
I think, jobs is the biggest.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I was 15 when Suquamish, I grew up in Suquamish. I've got family both in Suquamish and Port Gamble. And my dad was chairman of the Suquamish tribe when they opened their first casino. And like I said, I was 15. And what I remember about that day is speech after speech after speech about jobs. And as a 15-year-old, I didn't understand the importance of that, but I just remember that was the theme for sure. And now seeing what that property has done and how it has fundamentally changed the trajectory of our community is so impactful that,
Mhm.
I now spend my life protecting it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah, yeah.
it's yeah.
We find that Indian gaming is doing what it was intended to do, and that's lift communities out of poverty.
Mhm.
We're getting ready to roll out new updated economic data that really shows that tribal numbers are moving in the right direction for things like education and healthcare statistics and that sort of thing, poverty rates, they're all moving in the right direction. But in Washington, we're still a good 50% behind our state citizens when it comes to Indians living on the reservation. And I think that's a really important point that uh, even though we have now have this access to capital and are having success with our tribal enterprises, there is still such a long way to go, an unmet need in Indian country that we're still, talking about basic infrastructure for some.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. The next question I was, wanted to get to was actually a good segue there, was just how do you navigate, if you will, you know, kind of the state and, local officials, and just kind of educating them on what that, can do for their community as well. Not that every tribe that does have gaming is in a, if you will, kind of like a metro area where there's, some sort of maybe major city nearby. But there's always that state and kind of local community type of relationship that has to happen. So if you can just maybe provide some insight on that, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, so, I think in Washington, we have really strong state tribal relations. We have, some through our history with the fishing wars. Um, then we had the Centennial Accord that outlined the government to government relationship that the state and the tribes would work together. We have the Millennial Agreement, and now we have it codified in state law that requires consultation, tribal consultation on any areas of mutual concern. Um, with that said, I think that there is such an opportunity that is needed to tell our story. And the late Billy Frank would say, "Tell your story, tell your story, tell your story." And I can't express enough how important that becomes, because as you have new elected leaders or new staff that are working in Indian country, for them to understand who we are and what we're working on here, I think becomes really vital to the work that we're doing. So I think telling your story, I think doing it often, inviting local officials to the reservation, I think is so life changing for that elected official who can begin to understand tribes and tribal sovereignty and what that all means.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it's just that's what it comes down to. Usually it's just education. Sometimes I find, you know, I'm a board member on one our tribe's gaming enterprise, and it's just educating them on what it is, and a lot of them do still have the old stigma, as I mentioned before, about it, and what it does. And, there is sometimes, that misconception that, hey, we'll just put up a property and we're going to go gangbusters. And sometimes, that's not the case. And it's about, okay, what can we do with what we have? And then how can we use that, moving forward, whether or not, it's just job creation, which is sometimes good enough, and just having a job, being productive
Right.
and all that good
Right.
stuff. And it's not going to be every story where it's going to be just a gangbuster kind of thing. And, and so those are some things that, kind of communicate, here and there, and say, well, it kind of brings me back, so one time I was at the board meeting, stepped out and was going to get a cup of coffee. Right. And I saw the janitor, standing there, and he was kind of looking out because there's this new property that was built, right? And we're having a meeting there. And I was like, "Hey, man, you look pretty happy this morning. What's going on?" He goes, "Well, hey, I'm just kind of realizing 2 years ago there was nothing here, right?"
Yeah.
And I was I was driving an hour and a half to a job, and I was working for a school. I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And now that we have this and I have a job, I'm like 15 minutes away, and I'm
Mm.
pretty happy about that. And I was like, oh, dang. And then it strike me until like later on, I was thinking about it, like, whoa, that's crazy. He's actually kind of right. There wasn't, a place here for creation of jobs and whatnot. And then now, this person has, that job. And so that's definitely, something that was pretty cool, that kind of experience. And I was like, okay, cool. That's super cool. Well,
Yeah, for sure. And and
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, in Washington, our rural tribes, they're often one of the largest employers in their area. And collectively, tribes are one of the top 10 employers here in Washington state, that we're offering career jobs. That if you start in the casino, there's tracks for you to grow. And there are also good government jobs. So I think there's real opportunity there in Indian country for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a good point. So, with respect to, gaming, what other, you know, um, economic development, incentives or examples that you're starting to see um, that where, it's not necessarily gaming oriented, but, because of gaming, it's allowed the tribe to really maybe think or dive into that, and, one example we talked to is with Mr. James Siva with the Morongo tribe, right? And he talked about how it's allowed them to move into retail and different opportunities outside of that financial services. So I'm just curious, what other non-gaming opportunities have you seen that have been you know probably more recently, if you will, um, an opportunity for tribes.
Sure. Yeah. Gaming really has been the first sort of access to capital that tribes have had. Before gaming, banks wouldn't talk to us, they wouldn't loan us money, right? Now, that's where some of the misperceptions about why there are so many um, trailers on reservations, right? Like you can come take the trailer, you can't take the land. And so banks wouldn't even talk to us. And so now that we have had this success and this access to capital, tribes and tribal leaders really see the need to diversify because gaming is just one small piece of that. And while it's the majority of our tax base, you are seeing tribes for sure diversifying into the medical and dental fields. You see retail, everything that you had just mentioned, golf, construction companies, broadband companies, really across the board, looking to find what services are needed in Indian country that aren't currently there. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of medical facilities, treatment facilities. We're seeing housing that has been a huge one for employees, education. So the things that the money goes to support is really across the.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely something we talked about too, and I think that's kind of really what draws me to it as well, is really just all the different avenues that this capital creates, and what options do we have, and what could we do to better services to the constituents, if you will. So
For my tribe, I'm grateful that we are now talking about investing. To me, that is really future looking,
mhm.
forward, and is an exciting time for me in sort of our tribe's history that we're at a financial place that we can do that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a lot better conversation, right, than saying we can invest in something than hey, we're short or we don't have this and that, and so that's definitely better conversations had, obviously, and so kind of talking about the future, what kind of trends are you seeing with respect to gaming, and you know what are you seeing as far as technology goes, and whatnot, and how operate different gaming operations are utilizing that to stay competitive and meet, if you will, the gaming user of the future, right? Or
Sure.
those
Sure.
next generation of players.
Mhm. Yeah, I think our guides have always been really innovative when it comes to whatever their offerings are. We are a little bit hand tied here in Washington. We've got a pretty prohibitive gambling statute that says unless something's explicitly allowed, then it's considered illegal. So we have had to, by supermajority vote of our legislature, authorize gambling in certain circumstances. So it's pretty prohibitive here as far as technology goes because RNG, random number generators, aren't authorized here. So we've authorized gambling pretty limited here in Washington, which is good on one hand for tribes, and then thinking about how we move into the future technology wise, we've got to become more creative. Our biggest push here recently was field testing with electronic table games. That's pretty exciting for our folks to um, you know uh, be in the field and testing these things versus in a lab. So streamlining some of the processes for bringing new games to the floor, I think is big. Depends on who you talk to at what property, but they're always looking to make sure they're ready when and if we go online. I'm not saying that we are, but I think our folks are always ready for whatever the future is going to bring, and this is no different.
Yep. Yep. That definitely is kind of been the chatter lately, is just really online, and how does that, um, affect brick and mortar type of operations, and all that good stuff. And, you know, is is the client experience going to change, and how do we, meet that? Those are some of the different questions or even conversations, we've been having about, okay, well, what does that look like for the next generation of individuals that,
Right.
are going to, pay to play for entertainment and all that good stuff. And so it'd be interesting next couple of
Yeah,
years.
I think what we're seeing here too in Washington is that the gamer is one part of it, but it's the overall experience of coming to our properties that's really the drive. So the restaurants, the entertainment, the other factors, I think that also support the gaming operations. Tribes and tribal leaders have become acutely aware of those offerings and how that drives traffic to
Right.
their to the floor.
Right. Right. So, you talked about, kind of telling your story. So, from a national level, with your work with Native Vote Washington, um, how do you see, gaming enterprises, leveraging their position to go to the national level and, really uh, fight in, kind of communicate about sovereignty, and especially now, with the kind of, the real, um, how do you say this? I guess like aggressive moves that the current administration is, putting in place, and um, what does that mean to, communicate what tribes do and are, and kind of moving forward.
Sure. Yeah. I think that our workforce being one of the top employers here in Washington is a really, I believe, untapped um, opportunity for tribes. I think what we find is that people, one, just don't know a lot about tribes, but when they learn about tribes, they're willing to change their opinions about us. And so, a big part of it to me is back to the education piece, and we're finding, through onboarding of employees, tribes that are incorporating parts of the story, talking about the tribe and the tribal government and where the money goes, and really educating that employee to not just understand the casino, but to really understand Indian gaming and where the money goes, I think becomes really vital to helping the conversation come full circle.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
And
Well,
voting, I'm telling you, I
yeah.
was not a regular voter until I moved to our state capital, and I realized as an Indian sitting in the room, in these hearings, that these guys were making decisions that was impacting my everyday life, and I didn't understand that to the extent that I do now, in really needing to know who supports tribes and tribal sovereignty, and what can we do to help them get elected, and voting is a big part of that.
Right. No,
Mhm.
it's a good point.
Big
Well,
fan of voting.
right. Yeah. Hey, no, it's important. It definitely is. Um, well, as we kind of come to a close, Rebecca, I always like to leave just an opportunity. I know that you're very passionate in what you do, and you know, if you were to speak with the next generation of, leaders, or anyone really wanting to see how either, gaming, or what it provides and all that, what what kind of advice, would you give them, as far as kind of experience from your path, and what it looks like for kind of the next generations coming through.
Yeah, I think um my style really kind of boils down to show up, work hard, and be honest. I think that showing up is 90% of this whole thing, right? And so showing up, asking questions, being interested, have an understanding, getting involved with your tribal government, um, and understanding. I think the other big part of this is understanding state government, understanding how both the state and the federal government operate, how they're passing laws and how those laws are impacting or not impacting tribal sovereignty. And so, yeah, just showing up, working hard, and being prepared, I think is the important piece. And I always often think, so much of my work is to protect Indian gaming that I hope for our future generations that my daughter or my grandchildren can move off of this need to protect and into a world of thriving.
Yep. That's a good point. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And I always remember my basketball coach was always telling me that, hey man, you showed up, that's half the battle, and now it's just that's actually pretty cool. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point. Um, well, Rebecca,
When
thank you
I
so
was
much. Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to say when I was first hired into this position as the executive director, I was wound tight, really, really tight. I
Mm,
was worked up and was sure that I was going to embarrass my family or, make a mess of the association. And it was really unproductive. And I finally, that was sort of my mantra that came to me. It's like, just show up and work hard and be honest, and the rest is going to work out.
yeah, yeah. No, if you got good intent behind your decisions and all that, it just kind of all flows together, and those opportunities come and arise and yeah, that's definitely, I'm glad that you had some self-reflection on that, and it looks like everything's coming along pretty well for you. So that's great. That's great. Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Thank you for, building a perspective on how tribal and non-tribal communities are important for each other and how we need to, collaborate and educate more. And just to our listeners, don't, miss our episodes exploring how tribal gaming can create a positive economic and social impact, for future generations to come. And until then, thank you for listening. Yeah.